My dad secretly mixed sugar and honey into their bathroom grout after entitled homeowners refused to pay me. $4,800. Then they spent $14,000 trying to fix what came next. I need to tell you about my dad, because what he did last month is either the most brilliant thing I have ever seen a grown man do with a bag of sugar and a bucket of grout, or the most insane. Honestly, I still have not decided. Maybe it was both. My name is Bryce. I'm 31 years old, and I run a small plumbing and tile outfit out of Central Ohio. I've been doing this kind of work for about 8 years now. I started as a helper on my dad's crew when I was 19, got my own license at 23, and went out on my own when I was 25. I do kitchens, bathrooms, full remodels, whatever people need. It is honest work. It pays the bills. I am not getting rich, but I am doing all right. I have a little house on about half an acre outside of town, a truck that runs most of the time, and enough money in savings that I do not panic every time the furnace makes a noise. My Yelp reviews are solid. I am sitting at 4.8 stars with more than 60 reviews, and until the Carlyles, I had never had a job turn into a dispute. My dad is the real deal. 30 years as a master plumber and tile specialist. He taught me everything I know. The man can look at a bathroom floor and tell you within a quarter inch where the subfloor dips. His hands are like sandpaper, and his eye for detail is almost obsessive. When I was a kid, he would rip out his own work if one tile was even a 1/16 of an inch off. I used to think he was crazy. Now I understand. He is semi-retired now. Sometimes he helps me on bigger jobs when I need an extra set of hands, but most of the time he is at home working in his vegetable garden or watching old westerns. Last spring, he built a raised bed system in the backyard with cedar planks, drip irrigation, the whole setup. That is just who he is. If he touches something, it is either done right or it does not get done. He is a quiet man. He does not say much, but when he does talk, it is worth listening to. My mom passed about 4 years ago, and he has been on his own since then. I think it made him even quieter, but not sadder, just more settled, like a man who already knows what matters and does not waste words on anything else. Anyway, about 2 months ago, I got a call from a couple I will call Richard and Diane Carlisle. They wanted a full master bathroom renovation, tear out the old tile floor and shower surround, install new porcelain tile throughout, new grout, new trim, the whole deal. They had found me through a referral from a neighbor I had done work for the year before. I went out to their place to give an estimate. It was a big house in one of those newer subdivisions where every home looks the same, and I swear the HOA probably has opinions about the font on your mailbox. The Carlyles walked me through the bathroom and showed me what they wanted. Diane had a binder, not just some loose notes or a few pictures on her phone. A literal 3-ring binder with photos torn from magazines, paint swatches, and tile samples organized by color family. I quoted them $4,800 for the full job, materials and labor included. That was a fair price for the scope. Honestly, it was a little under what most guys would charge, but the neighbor referral meant something to me, and I figured if I did a clean job in that subdivision, it could lead to more work. There were probably 200 homes in that neighborhood, most of them built around the same time, which meant their bathrooms were all reaching the age where things start needing to be replaced. One good job there could turn into 10. Richard nodded at the number without even blinking. Diane wrote it down in her binder. Yes, in the actual binder. Then she asked if I could break it down by materials and labor, so I did, because I was not trying to hide anything. She studied the numbers for a minute, looked at Richard, and then they both agreed. We shook hands. I wrote up a contract with the scope of work, payment terms, timeline, and everything spelled out clearly. They signed it, and I scheduled the work to start the following Monday. The job took about 5 days, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 each day, except Wednesday when I had to leave a little early because my truck needed an oil change. I tore out all the old tile. The demo alone took a full day because whoever had installed the previous tile had used way too much thinset. I prepped the subfloor, which was in decent shape, thank goodness. I laid the new porcelain in the staggered pattern Diane had picked from her binder. I grouted everything with the medium gray color she had specifically chosen, after ordering 6 sample colors before deciding. I sealed it. I installed new trim around the base and the shower threshold. I even caulked the transition points with color-matched silicone, which is not always included at that price point, but I like the finished look. It was clean, solid work. But during the job, things started getting weird. Diane hovered. And I do not mean she checked in once or twice. I mean she was in that bathroom every 45 minutes, with her phone out, taking pictures of the progress and comparing them to the photos in her binder. She would point at a tile and say things like, "This one seems darker than the sample," or "Is this edge supposed to be that close to the wall?" I explained everything patiently, because that is what you do when you're working in someone's home. I told her the tile had natural color variation, especially porcelain with a stone look finish. I told her the spacing was within industry standards. I showed her the level. I showed her the spacers. She would nod like she understood, then come back an hour later with basically the same concern, just worded a little differently. Richard was different. He barely spoke during the job, but when he did, it was always some version of, "Well, Diane has very high standards." The way he said it felt less like helpful context and more like a warning, like he was setting the stage for something. I've been doing this long enough to recognize when someone is building a case to dispute the final bill. The constant photos, the vague complaints that are never specific enough to actually fix. The spouse who keeps mentioning standards. It is a pattern. I hoped I was wrong. I finished on Friday, cleaned everything up, and did the final walkthrough with both of them. Diane brought the binder. She went over every tile, every grout line, every corner. She took more photos. Then she said something I will never forget. "I will need some time to evaluate the work before we release payment." I told her that was fine and that she could take the weekend, but I reminded them that according to the contract, payment was due within 5 business days of completion. Monday came. Nothing. Tuesday came. Nothing. I texted Richard on Wednesday. He said Diane was still evaluating. I asked if there was a specific concern. He said she had noticed some irregularities. I called Diane directly on Thursday. She answered on the first ring, which told me she had been waiting for that call. She did not even say hello. She just launched into a list like she had rehearsed it. She said the grout lines were not perfectly uniform. She said one tile near the toilet base had a slight lip. She said the color variation between tiles was unacceptable. She said the shower threshold was not level and that she had put a marble on it to test the grade, like she was running some kind of home science experiment. She also said the caulking near the shower door looked cloudy, which made no sense because silicone caulk is translucent. That is what it looks like. That is what all silicone caulk looks like. I told her I would come back and look at every concern. I went over that Saturday with my level measuring tools and the whole kit. I checked every single thing she had listed. The grout lines were within a 1/16 of an inch of each other, well within standard tolerance. The tile near the toilet had a tiny lip of maybe 2 millimeters, which was normal on a subfloor transition and completely safe. The color variation was inherent to the tile she picked, and I literally showed her the manufacturer spec sheet saying natural variation in color was expected and desirable. As for the shower threshold, it was dead level. I put my 4-foot level on it right in front of both of them. Perfect bubble. Diane looked at it and said, "Well, it does not look level." That was when I knew. This was not about quality. This was about money. I told them the work met every standard we had agreed to in the contract and that I needed payment by the end of the week. Diane said she would think about it. Richard walked me to the door, looked me straight in the eye and said, "You know, some contractors would just eat this and move on, to keep the peace." I did not say anything. I just got into my truck and drove home. I remember sitting in my driveway for a good 10 minutes before going inside. It was not just because I was upset, though I was. It was because I was tired. You put your body through a full week of labor. You leave a job site cleaner than you found it. You document everything. You explain everything. You show people the tools, the measurements, the specs, the proof. Then someone looks you in the face and tells you to just take the loss. It hits different when you are a small operation. I do not have a corporate office absorbing losses like that. That $4,800 is groceries, truck payments, lights, supplies, and rent on equipment. By the end of the following week, there was still no payment. I sent a formal demand letter by certified mail. Nothing. I called twice. Once Diane picked up and told me she had a professional friend evaluate the work and that this friend agreed it was substandard. She could not tell me who the friend was, what their qualifications were, or what specifically was substandard that I had not already disproven. So now I was out $4,800, plus my time, plus materials. And these people were living in a beautiful bathroom I had built with my own hands, while treating me like I was some kind of scam artist. I told my dad about it over dinner one Sunday. We eat together most Sundays. I bring food over, we sit at the same kitchen table he has had since I was a kid, and we talk about whatever. That night, I had brought sandwiches from a deli he likes, and I just started unloading the whole story. Diane's binder, Richard's high standards routine, the marble on the threshold, the phantom professional friend. I was just venting. I was not even asking for advice. I had already started looking into small claims court, but I knew it would be months of nonsense for a judgment they would probably fight anyway. My dad listened without saying a word. When I finished, he took a long sip of his coffee, set the mug down and said, "Give me their number." I asked what he was talking about. He said, "I am going to call them and offer to fix the work for free. Father-son accountability. They will love it." I started to argue, but then he gave me that look. The one that tells you the discussion is already over. So I gave him the number. I need you to understand my dad. A 30-year master tradesman had just asked for the phone number of the two people who stiffed his son. He did not raise his voice. He did not rant. He did not pound the table. He just sipped his coffee like a man who had already played out every move in his head. The Carlyles thought they had dodged a $4,800 bill. They had no idea they had just invited the final boss into their house. My dad called them the next morning. I was not there for the call, but he told me afterward how it went. He introduced himself as my father and said he had been in the tile business for 30 years. He told them he was embarrassed by the work his son had done and wanted to come fix it personally at no charge as a matter of professional pride. Diane apparently started gushing. She said it was wonderful and refreshing to deal with someone who took craftsmanship seriously. She said she could tell my dad was from a different generation of tradesmen. She even told him she wished I had his attention to detail. My dad told me that part with no expression on his face whatsoever. He relayed it like he was reading a weather report, but I could tell it landed. I think that was the moment it stopped being a lesson and became a mission. He said, "Thank you, ma'am," and scheduled a visit for that Saturday. Now, I need to be clear. My work was not bad. It was not sloppy. It was not below standard. My dad inspected the bathroom himself the night before his Saturday visit. He got down on his hands and knees with a flashlight and checked every grout line, every tile edge, every seam. When he stood up, he looked at me and said, "Your work is clean. Better than clean." Coming from him, that was high praise. Then he went out to the garage. At first, I had no idea what he was doing. I heard him rummaging around, opening cabinets, moving things. When he came back inside, he was carrying a small plastic container with maybe half a cup of regular granulated sugar and a squeeze bottle of honey, the little bear-shaped kind you buy at the grocery store. I asked him what that was for. He said, "Insurance." That Saturday, my dad showed up at the Carlyles' house with his tool bag, a bucket of fresh grout, and his insurance. He told me later that Diane answered the door looking like she had won some kind of contest. She walked him through the bathroom and pointed out every imaginary flaw she had cataloged. My dad nodded along and said things like, "I see what you mean," and "My son should have caught that." He played the part perfectly. Then he told them he would need about 4 hours alone to redo the grout properly. He said he worked best without anyone watching, an old-school habit. Diane said, of course, and that they were going to be out running errands anyway. They left. He watched from the window until their car turned the corner. Then he locked the front door and went to work. But he was not fixing anything because there was nothing to fix. He told me later that he sat down on the bathroom floor for a full 5 minutes first, just looking at everything and planning. He was figuring out which areas would have the most moisture exposure, which spots were least visible, where warm air from the shower would circulate, and where the problem would spread without being obvious at first. Thinking like the bugs would think, he said. Then he started. He pulled out grout from a few strategic places, behind the toilet base, along the shower floor seams, and in the corners where the wall tile met the floor. Places you would not easily see unless you knew exactly where to look. Then he mixed his new batch of grout. Except before he packed it in, he stirred in the sugar. Not a ton, just enough to mix through evenly. In the deeper seams along the shower floor, he squeezed thin lines of honey before packing the grout over them. Then he grouted everything back in, smooth and perfect. He cleaned his tools, wiped down the surfaces, and left the bathroom looking exactly like it had before. Maybe even a little better because my dad's finishing work is immaculate. When the Carlyles came home about 3 hours later, my dad was sitting on the front porch drinking from a water bottle and reading a fishing magazine he had found on their coffee table. Diane went straight to the bathroom. She stayed in there for maybe 15 minutes, checking every grout line, running her fingers along the seams, and probably taking 40 more photos. When she came out, she said she was satisfied, for the first time. She actually used the word pristine. Richard shook my dad's hand and said something like, "This is what we expected from the beginning." My dad just smiled and said, "Thank you." Then he put his tools in the truck, returned the fishing magazine to the coffee table, and drove home. He did not tell me what he had done right away. That night at dinner, he just said, "It is handled." I assumed he meant he had smoothed things over somehow. I let it go. But looking back, those two words should have told me everything. My father had just sabotaged a bathroom with sugar and honey, like some kind of patient blue-collar mastermind, then came home and gave me a debrief like nothing unusual had happened. Meanwhile, Diane was probably in that bathroom, admiring the grout lines, and thinking she had finally forced a tradesman into submission. She had not broken anyone. She had activated a quiet old man who had been solving problems since before she started organizing tile samples into color families. And the clock had started ticking. About 10 days later, my dad sat me down and told me everything. The sugar, the honey, where he put it, why he put it there. Sugar and grout does two things according to him. First, it weakens the grout over time because it interferes with the cement curing process. Within a few weeks, the grout in those spots would start crumbling and cracking. But more importantly, sugar and honey attract insects, specifically ants. And once ants find a food source inside a wall or floor, they tell their friends. Then their friends tell their friends. Within a couple of weeks, you can end up with an ant superhighway running through the bathroom infrastructure. My dad knew that because more than 20 years earlier, he had done a repair job in a house where a previous handyman had accidentally spilled soda inside a wall cavity before closing it up. By the time my dad got there, the ant infestation was so bad they had to gut the entire wall. He never forgot it. When he told me what he had done, I just sat there. I did not know whether to laugh or have a panic attack. My dad is not a vindictive person. He is the quietest, most even-tempered man I know. But he has a line, and if you cross it, especially if you mess with his family, he becomes a different person. Not loud different, quiet different, which is worse. I asked him if he was worried about getting caught. He said, "Caught doing what? I fixed the grout. I used a standard Portland cement mix. If bugs show up, that is a pest control issue, not a plumbing issue." Then he went right back to watching Gunsmoke. I could not stop thinking about it. The man had weaponized breakfast condiments. He had turned a bear-shaped honey bottle into a biological delivery system. It was like Sun Tzu meets Martha Stewart. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting, except the enemy is a woman with a 3-ring binder, and the weapon is sugar. If revenge were a cooking show, my dad had just won the season finale without even turning on the oven. 3 weeks after my dad's visit, I got a text from the neighbor who had originally referred me to the Carlyles. She asked if I had heard what was going on at their house. She said they had some kind of massive bug problem and that Diane was losing her mind. I played dumb and said no, I had not heard anything. I asked what kind of bugs. She said ants, tons of them. They were coming up through the bathroom floor and along the base of the shower. She told me Diane had posted in the neighborhood Facebook group asking for emergency pest control recommendations, and that the post had something like 40 comments. I will admit I looked up that Facebook post. I sat on my couch with a bowl of cereal and read the whole thing twice. Diane had written a long, dramatic description, 4 paragraphs or so, about how they had woken up one morning to find hundreds of ants swarming their master bathroom. She said they were coming from the grout lines and behind the toilet. She said she had tried every spray and trap from the hardware store, and nothing was working. Then she wrote, "We just had this bathroom completely redone, and now it is like this. Unbelievable." And yes, it was unbelievable. Over the next 2 weeks, it got worse, way worse. The ants were only the opening act. A second neighbor, a guy named Phil, who lives 2 doors down from the Carlyles, told me Diane had knocked on his door at 7 in the morning, asking if he had ever had a pest problem. He said she looked like she had not slept. He also told me the Carlyles had called a pest control company, and that the company found evidence of cockroaches in the bathroom walls. Apparently, the moisture from the shower combined with the sugar traces had created a perfect little ecosystem. Warm, humid, and loaded with simple carbohydrates. Basically, an all-you-can-eat buffet for anything with 6 legs. The pest control guy told them the infestation had likely been building for weeks and had spread from the bathroom into the adjacent bedroom wall. He apparently found ant trails running behind the baseboard all the way into their walk-in closet. Diane's closet, with all her shoes and clothes. I probably should not have laughed when Phil told me that part, but I did. Then Diane called me. She actually called me and asked if something I had done during the original tile job could have caused a bug problem. I told her calmly and professionally that tile and grout work does not cause pest issues. I suggested she contact a licensed exterminator, which she clearly already had. Then she asked if my dad might have accidentally introduced something. I told her my dad had been doing this for 3 decades and had never had a pest complaint. She did not have a response to that. There was a long pause. Then she said very quietly, "Okay," and hung up. I put my phone down on the counter and just stood there for a second. Then I made myself a sandwich. I do not know why I remember that detail, but I do. Turkey and mustard. Totally irrelevant, but that is what was happening. What made it even crazier was the audacity of her calling me at all. She had refused to pay me. She had told me to eat the loss. Then when the consequences started crawling out of her grout lines, she called me for answers. That is like slashing someone's tires and then asking them for a ride to work. If entitlement were an Olympic sport, the Carlyles would be on the cereal box. But I kept my composure. I did not gloat. I did not flinch. I gave her the most boring, professional, technically helpful answer possible and let her sit with it. Over the following weeks, I got the full picture through the neighbor network. Apparently, the Carlyles went through 3 different pest control companies. The first one did a standard treatment, sprays, bait traps, the basics. It did not work. The ants kept coming. The second company did a more aggressive treatment and found that the infestation had reached their bedroom closet somehow. They treated the whole upstairs. It still did not fully work. The ants would disappear for a day or 2, then come right back because the source was in the grout. And nobody was looking at the grout. Why would they? Grout is grout. Nobody thinks to test grout for sugar content. That is not a thing. Until it is. The third company was the one that finally figured it out, sort of. They told the Carlyles there was an organic attractant somewhere in the bathroom structure, and that the only way to fully eliminate the problem was to tear out the affected tile and grout, treat the subfloor, and reinstall everything. So the Carlyles had to hire another tile crew to rip out the very bathroom I had built and my dad had fixed. I think about the irony of that a lot. They refused to pay $4,800 for the first install. Now they were paying someone else even more money to undo it and start over. And this time, they could not exactly use the "I need time to evaluate the work" card because they were desperate. You do not get to play games with a bill when there are roaches in your closet. From what I heard through the grapevine, the total damage went something like this. Around $3,200 across the 3 pest control companies. About $6,500 for the tile tear-out and reinstall, because they had to hire whoever could do it fastest and emergency work cost more. Another $800 or so in hotel stays because Diane refused to sleep in the house while the roach situation was being handled. And then some extra amount, though I never got a firm number, for the exterminator to treat the bedroom wall that had been affected too. Someone said the whole thing ran over $14,000. For context, they could have paid me $4,800 and had a beautiful, perfectly installed bathroom. Instead, they got ants, roaches, hotel bills, and a bathroom that had to be gutted and redone by strangers. When I told my dad the numbers, he did not react. He just nodded slowly and said, "Expensive lesson." Then he asked if I wanted more coffee. It has now been about 6 weeks since the Carlisle's bathroom was redone by the new crew. The pest situation is apparently under control. I have not heard from Richard or Diane directly, and I do not expect to. The neighbor who originally referred me felt terrible about the whole thing. She had no idea the Carlisles were going to try to skip out on payment. Since then, she has recommended me to 2 more families in the neighborhood, and both became paying clients. They paid on time, no drama. So that part worked out. I did eventually file in small claims court for the original $4,800. I filled out the paperwork, paid the filing fee, and showed up on a Tuesday morning with my contract, my photos, my text message screenshots, and the certified mail receipt from the demand letter. The Carlisles did not even show up to the hearing. I think they were too wrapped up in their bug situation at the time. The judge asked if I had documentation. I handed him the folder. He looked through it for about 90 seconds, asked if there had been any communication from the defendants, and I said no. Then he entered a default judgment. The whole thing took maybe 12 minutes. I collected about 3 weeks later, when they realized ignoring a court judgment is worse than just paying the bill. I think their bank account got flagged or something, because the payment came in real quick after that. So in the end, I got my money anyway. They paid me, and they paid roughly $14,000 on top of it to deal with the aftermath of their own entitlement. They also lost the referral pipeline from the neighbor, who now actively warns people about them. My dad has never brought it up again, not once. He went right back to his garden and his westerns like nothing happened. The last time I was over there, he was building a little trellis for his tomato plants out of scrap wood. Just a regular Sunday. I asked him one time if he felt bad about what he did. He gave me this look, not angry, not smug, just tired, and said, "They tried to steal from my son." That was it. End of discussion. Then he picked up his coffee and turned back to the TV. I think Longmire was on, or maybe Yellowstone. No, actually, it was probably Gunsmoke. It is always Gunsmoke. I still think about it sometimes. A quiet, patient man with a bag of sugar and a honey bear did more damage than any lawsuit could have. He did not yell at the Carlisles. He did not threaten them. He did not even raise his voice. He just let nature take its course, literally. The one thing I still cannot figure out, and probably never will, is whether the third pest control company ever told the Carlisles anything specific about the sugar. The neighbor said they mentioned an organic attractant, but did not get more specific than that. I do not know if they tested the grout or just treated the symptoms. Part of me thinks they knew something was off but could not prove anything. Part of me thinks the Carlisles will never figure it out. Either way, I am not losing sleep over it. I have been getting more work since all of this happened. Not because of the Carlisle situation, since nobody outside that neighborhood knows the full story, but because I keep doing good work and people keep talking. I am booked out about 5 weeks right now, which is the busiest I have ever been. My dad still comes out to help on bigger jobs when I ask. He showed up last week to help me with a kitchen floor in Westerville. He did not charge me a dime. He just wanted something to do. We worked side by side all morning without talking much. That is kind of our thing. One more thing happened about a month after everything settled down. Diane left a 1-star review of my business online. She said the work was shoddy and created ongoing problems. I responded publicly with photos of the finished work, the manufacturer specs for the tile she chose, the level readings I had documented, and a copy of the signed contract with the payment terms she had violated. Her review got 12 responses from other clients of mine defending my work. She deleted it within a week. My dad saw the review before she took it down. He just shook his head and said, "Some people do not know when to quit." Then he went outside to water his tomatoes. So that is the story. I am not saying what my dad did was right. I am definitely not saying it is something I would recommend. But I am saying there is a certain kind of justice in it. Not the kind that comes from a courtroom, even though I got that too. The other kind. The kind that comes from a man who spent 30 years perfecting his craft, being told that his family's work was not good enough by someone who thought owning a binder made her an expert. The Carlyles had every chance to do the right thing. They could have paid $4,800 for a clean, professional bathroom remodel and moved on with their lives. Instead, they played games with a family that builds things for a living. And it turns out, the man who has been mixing grout since before I was born knows exactly what happens when the wrong ingredients end up in the wrong place. $14,000 in pest control, hotel stays, and retiling later, I bet Diane's binder does not feel quite so useful anymore.